Hey everyone, in this video I'll quickly present some of the features you can find in Superstate Engine, then we'll go over the core feature which is the state object, and I'll show you a quick example of how it is used. So Superstate Engine has a lot of cool features. A lot of them are oriented toward making platformer games, but it can be used for much more than this. For example, there's the actor object that provides you with tile-based collisions and gravity. On top of that are the hero and enemy objects that add a way to classify your game objects and have them interact together. There's also the projectile object that can be used to create bullets and such that will interact with hero and enemy objects. All of these objects are child to the state object, which manages states, of course, but also animations, movement, and game pausing. It's a very useful object that lets you write complex behavior in an easy to write and read chronological order. Let me show you how this works. Okay, so I've got a new blank project I've created in GameMaker. There's nothing in it except the default room one, like that. I've just changed the background to be a slightly lighter color so it's easier to work with. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some sprite sheet I've got here. It's a little goblin that sleeps, wakes up, flees, and runs with a spear in his hand. So I'm just gonna drop that in GameMaker. I'll remove the extra strip here. Makes him 8 frames per second. And let's look at it. So he's just a cool guy, waking up, running around. I'm gonna make his origin middle center and he's ready to be used. So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in tools and import my Superstate Engine package here. But I only want the basic objects. The very basic stuff is just the state object here. There's a lot of cool stuff that will go over in future videos, but right now I'm just gonna use the state object here, which is just two things, the state object and a script file that contains a few things that the state object needs to run properly. So I import that, and then I'm gonna do create a new object. I'm gonna create a goblin object. So goblin, here we go. I'm gonna add the sprite that I've imported, that I've added to the project, and make his parent be the state object. So now that his parent is state object, we can see that there's a few events here that are native to the state object. And I'm gonna go in my room and add that little guy in the instance layer like that. So everything should be correct, except he's not doing anything. So let's add his behavior. So I'm opening my goblin object. I'm gonna go inherit event over to create, and I'm gonna create some animation. So create anim, which is a method that is defined in the create of state object. There's a lot of method in the state object that are expressly for the state object. So I'm going to do create anim, and what I do is I give it a name. I'm going to do the sleep animation, and I'm going to give him some values that are defining which frames I'm using in the sprite. So I'm opening the sprite sheet here. The sleep animation goes from 0 to 8 to 7 actually, 0 to 7. So I'm writing those frames down. So the sleep animation, which is an animation that goes from 0 to 7. If I want to try this, I'm gonna go play sleep. I'm calling the animation I've just created. Let's see how it goes. So it works perfectly. It's playing the animation I've defined in the create anim here, but not any more frames than that. So let's add other animation. I want the wake frame, which is going to be 8 when he wakes up here. and then there's the animation where he flees. So it goes from 8 to 16. So create anim flee. That must be 9 actually. 9 to 16. 9 to 16. Alright. What's next is go to 16. Then there's from 17 to 24. A simple run animation. Create anim run 17 to 24, where he runs with his spear in his hand. If I want to test, I got the sleep working. What about the run? Is it working correctly? Yep, everything's fine. And I've got a last one. Create anim, which is his hurt frame. The last frame here is 25. You can see that I'm only putting on one number here, so it's linked to the hurt string, and there's only one value. So the values here is the first frame. By default, the second value, last frame, will be the same than first frame. If I don't set any value, it's going to be the same. Then I can set the loop and speed. By default, loop is true and speed is 1. So I've set up my animation. Now I'm going to set my behavior. I'm going to inherit the step event. I want this to be written event.inherited here, so it uses everything that's in the state object. And then I'm going to do my own behavior. I will wrap thing in a do step condition. The do step is the pause system actually. So if I go in the state object, in the begin step, I can see that there's this part here. If the global value game pause or dialogue is true, the do step is going to be false. Otherwise, do step is going to be true. So this is the game pause here. The value is going to pause everything on the state object. So I'm using that to pause the game. We'll go over that in more details in the future video. So I wrap this in do step, and then I add a switch for my state value, which holds which state the object is in. So switch state case states.init, states init break. So that's the basic of it. States init is the default value, the starting state that every state object uses. I can change it here. If I want my object to use a different state when it's created, I can. Otherwise, I leave it to init, which is practical because I can change some values here, init some values before going on to another state. So I'm going to leave it like that and just send it myself to another state. I use become, which is also a state object method, and I'm going to do it become states. States.normal. Sorry about that. I'm going to define my new state. States.normal. Okay. So what it does here, when it's created, it becomes states init, but I make it become states normal as soon as it starts. So now what I'm going to do is I want my little guy to wake up. He sleeps a bit, wake up, then starts running around. So what I'm doing is state play sleep. So you saw before that I use just play like that. If I do this thing, it's going to be called every frame. However, that's not what I want because I want to write a sequence of action in my states. So instead I'm going to use state play. Every method, every function that is written like state something are played in chronological order, which is very practical. So let's see, state play is called once, and then it goes to the next state functions. Now I want just to add a pause, state pause, and I add a number here in step. So if I add 120, it's gonna wait for 120 steps before going to the next action. So 120 steps. My game is in 60 game frames per second, so it's gonna wait for 2 seconds. And then I want to do something else. I'm gonna waking up, state play wake. And let's just see if this works. Here goes. He waits for 2 seconds, then changes animation for the wake frame. Next, I'm gonna add another pause. Just pausing for 40 frame is gonna be fine. And then I want him to start running. So flee, actually. I'm gonna use run a bit later. So state play flee. Then I want it moving, state set speed. State set speed use two values. There's HSP for horizontal speed and VSP for vertical speed. So I want him to run on the X axis, so I'm gonna go with 4 and 0. And let's see how it works. He wakes up after 2 seconds and start running. He's going a bit slower than I'd like, so I'm gonna change it for 6. So he's running for a while, and then I'm gonna do a pause, but instead of waiting for a set time, I'm gonna do set pause until, which is gonna pause until a certain condition is met. I'm gonna check his X, and for the purpose of this example, I'm just going to check if he's outside of the screen. So I'm going to use room width plus 100. So he waits until he's out of the screen on the X-axis, and then I can do something else. So I want him to run back. So I'm going to change his speed to be -6 and 0, so -6 on the X-axis and 0 on the Y-axis. And I'm gonna change his direction, so -1 and 1. The first value is in a horizontal direction, and the second value is the vertical direction. So -1 is gonna look left instead of right, and 1 is gonna stay the same. If I put it -1, it's gonna make him upside down. That's not what I want, so I leave it to 1. So okay, so when he gets out of the screen on the right, I set his speed to be -6 and his direction to be -1, and I'm also gonna change his animation to be run instead of flee. So let's see what happens. He wakes up, start running, gets out of the screen, and come back with the other animation where he runs with his spear and gets out of the screen and never come back. So let's say I want him to come back after getting out of the screen on the left. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna pause until, so I check his X. If he's, let's say, -100, I'm gonna change his speed again back to 60 and set his direction to be 11. So he should be coming back this time. He wakes up, start running, gets out of the screen, come back with his spear. He's getting out of the screen on the other way and runs back this way. Cool. Now he gets out of the screen and will never come back because nothing else is happening after this sequence of action. So let's say I want him to run back and forth forever. Okay. What I can do and what I will do is set a new behavior. States. I want it to be called run. So states run doesn't exist, so I want to create it. I just middle click on states here. It's gonna bring me to my states enum, and I'm gonna add run to my enum. So now it's all good, it's in red, I like it. Here I'm gonna do a little change. I'm gonna add state become. So state become, what it does is that it sends into another state when it gets to this point in the order of the state. So state become states run, and I'm gonna take this here and put it into the run state instead. All good. So let's see what happens when it gets out of the screen on the right side, which is what is checked here. He becomes run, states run. So he's sent to the state here. His speed becomes -6, his direction becomes -1 on the horizontal axis, and he plays the run animation. I wait for it to go out of the screen on the left and send him back on the right with set speed 60 and set there 11. Now I'm gonna wait for it to come back off the screen on the right again. So x greater than room width plus 100. And I want it to loop back, so I'm gonna do state repeat. What does state repeat do? It just sends the state back to its beginning here. So it should play in a loop. Let's see what happens. He sleeps a bit, wake up, starts running. Once he's out, he becomes his states run state, goes out of the screen, and now he should repeat when it's out of the screen this way. So now he will run indefinitely from left to right and right to left. So that's about it for this video. You can see how it's very easy to set up a simple object, create animation, manage the animations, and do a basic behavior that is easy to read and easy to write. So we'll go over more things in the next video. Thanks everyone.